Welcome to Eastown Online. My name is Clint Dupin. It's so good to have you with us today. If you've never checked in here, simply text Eastown to 94000. We would love to send you a gift. I really want to get you connected. I think we are better together. We want to encourage you in your spiritual journey today. There are some things that are happening, going on here. It's called Easter, right? We are getting excited about our Easter service at Eastown. This is an opportunity for you to invite someone out. Maybe you've been watching online only. You're in the East Bay. This would be a great opportunity for you to visit in person. Watch this. Now, that's just a few of the things that happen here at Easter. This year, we're going to continue our Easter egg hunt. It was crazy. Over 500 people showed up last year. We're going to have cotton candy. We're going to have some other things for you. So make sure you come out and you spend that time with us. So we're going to have a lot of fun. Now, we are in a brand new series called 5 Words That Will Change Your Life. Now, we've been in this series titled 5 Words That Will Change Your Life. And does anyone remember the first word that we talked about? No? Exactly. It was no. You're right? It was no. How do we say no, right, to the busyness, the need to achieve, to worry, to filling up our lives with meaningless things, right? In order to actually hear what God is saying. And that's what I do. I know for me is like, the more disconnected I am in my relationship with God, the more I'm saying yes to things that God is not necessarily asking me to do. So we talked about that whole idea of saying no. If you never listened to it, listen to the podcast, go back online. You can go to our website or you can go to our YouTube channel and listen to that as well. The second week, we talked about the word yes, right? How can we say yes to God and yes to people? We invited you to put that word in a place that you will actually remember. And in fact, I received this picture last week from one of my friends who attended the service. And he said, hey man, trying to put this into action. And I'll tell you what, this is so encouraging to know that people are actually putting these truths and these promises into a place and into practice, right? So that's so important. And remember, last week, the whole idea was, how do we say yes to God when He is speaking to us? How can we count on His promises that we have a foundation that we can actually move forward in life? So brings us to this week. This week, the word can bring enormous freedom and meaning to our lives. But I also believe this, it's the most countercultural word of this whole series. And I'll get into it like this. You can think about 2 different ways about your life, right? And how to live your life, right? It's like there's this one way we can live our life and we kind of live it like this. We squeeze it really tight. So I want you to hold your fist like this wherever you are. Maybe if you're not driving, you can do this, right? If you're holding it like this, nothing can get in and nothing can get out. You clench it, you squeeze it, right? And I don't want you to let that go. And that's kind of how we do with life, right? It's like we just don't want to let go of anything that we have or anything that we think that we have earned. And then I want you to take the other hand and I want you to just simply open it. Now, this is a harder way to live your life, isn't it? that you hold on to things very loosely, like even relationships, right? Even our finances, our time. And that's what we're kind of talking about in this series is like, a lot of times we can't say yes to God because we're living like this over here. But you live in the reality that what you have is not really yours. What do I mean by that? It's like if we can live like this, that's really how we should be living because that's reality. It's like everything that we have can be taken away like that, can it? And some of you have experienced that. So in order to be the best steward possible of anything in our life, we have to live like this. Now, if you are a follower of Jesus, right, and maybe you're watching this and you've been following Jesus for quite some time, and you kind of find yourself you've been living like this a little bit. This is actually a symbol of trusting Him, living open-handed. It's saying, God, whatever comes into my life, I will fully trust you. I will hold it loosely. I'll share it easily. But for those of you who would say, man, I'm not quite there yet. I haven't put my faith and my trust in Jesus Christ. Maybe today is the day that you can actually live like that. You can invite Jesus into your life and you begin to trust Him. I know for me, I live like this quite often, tight fist. And I have to remember that I need to trust God with everything that enters into my life and move towards this. It's almost a decision I have to make every single day. The words that's behind this kind of life is the word enough, right? To say, God, I'll trust that you'll give me enough. That's the word we're focusing on. That you are the God of enough, that you are the God of abundance. So I don't have to be a taker, right? So many people go through life as takers. I have a taker deep inside of me. You have a taker inside of you. Now, I don't want to be a taker. I want to be a giver. I want to live life with an empty hand that actually starts by saying, enough, right? I have enough. I'll have enough. I don't need any more. In fact, the inability to say enough is very rampant, right? It's a idea that is fatal in our lives. And we see it all around us. It's so hard to admit if we have enough. And in fact, there are things that can't say enough, right? Did you know that most animals will eat themselves to death, right? They don't know how to say enough. They did these experiments that became famous in social science circles where they would give people bowls of soup. And half of the subjects got what was called the bottomless bowl of soup. They have soup, but the bottom of the bowl are actually secretly filled underneath the tablecloth. And here's what they found. They find that people whose bowls keep getting filled end up eating about twice as much food as people's bowls who are not miraculously filled. Not because they were hungry, not because they needed it. We don't know when to say enough. Now, this whole idea of enough is also true with money and possessions. I think we all want to be generous people. So here's the invitation. I want all of us, right, to evaluate ourselves. I want you to immerse yourself into the teaching today and not judge other people, but just look at yourself. Take an honest look at yourself. Because as a nation, we don't live like this. And in fact, I want to read this stat to you, and you're going to see this right here, is that out of the Book of American Generosity, it found that 84% of Americans give away 0 to 1% of their income. Isn't that crazy? Millions of people who have more than enough, they don't give anything. Now, listen to this. For those who are Christ followers in this land where God has given so much, we don't give much. And in fact, less than 3% of Americans give at the level of a tithe. Now, that might be a new word for you, right? If you have grown up in church, you probably have heard the Bible, right? Where God established this practice with Israel a long time ago called the tithe. And here's what tithe means. Tithe means that you give 10% of whatever God brings into your life as an expression of trust. Now, I know for some of you that's kind of hard, right? And hard to understand, but I just want you to stay with me. And in fact, here at Eastown, one of our steps in the generosity journey, our first one is roundup, our second one is reoccurring. We talk about relational giving is another step that we get to. This is where we give 10% of what God has given us. This is where we begin to give because of what God has done in our hearts and that we're trusting God with everything that He has given us. Now, I know some of us are not quite there yet. That's okay. As long as we identify it and we're making an active step towards where God wants us to be. Now, think about that. Almost 98% of people who live in this land with enough do not give near that level. Now, I want to invite you to start living like that today if you're not doing so already. And I'm going to live like this, right? It's like maybe you're thinking, I'm going to live like this, or I'm going to live like this. I'm going to live with a closed fist, or I'm going to live with an open hand. This invitation is for you. And here's what I really believe, and it did this for my wife, it did this for me. It sets you free. And I'm going to share a story with you at the very end of today. I want you to hang on, where it actually sets some people free as well. You begin to live out your purpose. Now, I want to give you kind of an illustration here that hopefully will make sense. And in this illustration, what you're going to see is that at one level is basically what I have, right? And then there's another line right up here where it's like, this is enough. And in between those two, right? In between of what I have and what would be enough in my life, we're going to call that space right there discontent, right? It's this idea that if I had more, like I'm not going to be happy. This is currently what I have. I'm not going to be happy till I get to this line. But you know what's crazy about that? That line always moves, doesn't it? There was a time in your life that you thought like, hey, if I get this much, if I have this much, I will be happy. But guess what? Maybe you're there now and it's still about wanting more. This zone always moves because enough is never enough. It turns out that what I thought was enough isn't enough. Enough ends up being this very elusive amount. And now I have a discontentment zone, don't I? And people go through their whole life long and think, man, if I just had more stuff, more money, a bigger house, a newer car, right? I'm not quite there yet. But someday I will actually get there. I love this quote by Jim Carrey. He says this, I wish everyone could get rich and famous. Maybe you've heard this quote. And everything that they have ever dreamed of so they can see that's not the answer. You can chase followers and money all you want, but don't let me stop you. But I hope you'll realize beyond your basic needs, they won't do much. Right? And I think we all have a story in our life where we're trying to pursue the happiness. I know that there's multiple stories in my life, whether it's with my children, it's with my career, it's with my wife, whatever it is. I think about all the time that I've spent money like on my children, wanting them to have happiness, and they don't quite feel the same way, right? Maybe you've taken your kids to Disneyland or a theme park, and you're like, at the end of the day or in the middle of the day, they're done with it. You're like, no. This is the place where dreams are made of. You will be happy, right? We go through life thinking happiness can be purchased. If I just had enough money, then I would be happy enough. But here's the truth, isn't it? Selfish people are the most miserable people, and generous people are the most joyful people. Isn't that true? It's like, I know for me, the more generous I am, the happier I am. So what if you were to declare enough? This is where this gets really countercultural. We live in a part of the world that's going to tell you, if you ever declare enough, if you're not getting more and bigger and better, it's like you'll never, ever be happy. A friend of mine is one of the top art dealers in the world. I don't know how I met this guy, but he was an incredible guy. When Michael and I led a church in Detroit, he was a part of that community. And we would meet and talk about this subject of enough. We would talk about generosity. And he was able to see firsthand the impact of living a more generous life. He actually went with me on a trip to Kenya, and we showed him different orphanages and clean water, and he came back a changed person. And in fact, he shared with me that he no longer wanted to live a life that was all about acquiring. He actually wanted to live differently. He actually put a stake in the ground and said, you know what? Enough is enough. And no longer am I going to live this discontented life, but I'm going to live a generous life. Because here's the truth. It's like we were made to live generous. We're created in the image of God, a generous God. Now, this life acquired attention by his friends because he was living differently. Why? Because it was countercultural, but it was the way to joy. Is that crazy? It's like when you start living a generous life, it doesn't make sense to people who are not living generously. And in fact, they think, what is wrong with you? Why would you give away so much that is things that you've earned? Now, I want to share a scripture passage where we see this in effect, where a person who was living like in a discontented world, but then they realized because of their interaction with Jesus, they actually had enough. And in fact, a few weeks ago, they talked about this in Eastown Kids. My kids came home and told me about, hey, we talked about this guy named Zacchaeus, right? Now, this was a man that had enough, but he wanted more. So I want to invite you to listen to this on a personal level and also on a level as a Eastown community if you're a part of Eastown. And when I invite you to listen to that as on a personal level, here's what I want you to think about. Is there maybe are these thoughts in your life right now that you think, I'll give more when I make more. That's not generosity. Wherever you are in the socioeconomic spectrum, you can give, you can be generous. You might not be able to give as much quantity, but when you understand when Jesus talks about generosity, it has everything to do with the heart. What is God asking of you? So let's look at Luke chapter 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and he was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was a short man, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, which had to be funny, and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. By this passage, we know that Zacchaeus, he knows money, right? That he was around money. He was motivated by money. We know this because Israel was occupied by Rome. And Rome had learned when they would occupy a country, don't exile those people, leave most of them there, but just tax them, tax the heck out of them, right? Then Rome could get a lot of money from them. That meant they would need a few people who would serve as tax collectors because those would be the guys who know where the wealth actually was. Now, people in Israel didn't like tax collectors because they colluded with the oppressive Romans. Now, Zacchaeus had already given up on relationships and community. Nobody liked Zacchaeus, right? He's okay with that because he's rich and he's really good at it. But over time, there's something that he's discovered that's really empty in him. Now, just pause for a moment. If I told you to immerse yourself in this story, are you empty? Is there something that you have been pursuing and like you still feel empty? You're looking for it so hard and you feel that emptiness. This is God speaking to you right now if you can identify that. Now, there's something hungry in Zacchaeus. Something is kind of gnawing in him. So he's interested in this man, Jesus. This rabbi, the spiritual teacher, you would never expect a tax collector, let alone a chief wealthy tax collector, to be interested in a spiritual teacher. But he is. Now, I love the details that Luke, the author, puts in this story, which tells me that Luke actually talked with Zacchaeus in writing this story. In the ancient Middle Eastern world, rich, powerful guys, they never ran, right? They were too dignified to do that. They all wore robes. You can't run well. Have you ever tried to run in a robe? I don't want to see it if you have. Zacchaeus runs. This is what the scripture tells us. Something in him really desires to see Jesus. He wants to get ahead of the crowd. Now, in the ancient Middle Eastern world, a rich, powerful guy never would climb trees nor run in public where other people could actually see him. We are told that Zacchaeus was a little man. And in fact, some of you grew up in a church and you probably sang that song, Zacchaeus was a wee, okay, I'll stop, right? Nobody wants to be that wee little man. He is drawn to money to make himself feel bigger than he was. It's crazy, isn't it? It's no different in our time than it was then. Money will make people look at you like you must be somebody. Like you must be this big man, this big woman, right? He thinks nobody sees him in this tree, and here comes Jesus. Now, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. Now, maybe you have been through bankruptcy. Maybe you have stolen. Maybe you have cut corner on like taxes. Maybe you have been greedy. And I want you to look at this passage right here. It says, there is nothing that you have done where Jesus won't come to your house. There is nothing that will prevent you from experiencing the grace of Jesus. He will bring grace to your life, to your house today. Jesus always arrives with grace first. Now, maybe you haven't felt that. Maybe you have felt condemned. Maybe you have felt that there's a Christian or there's a person that calls themselves a Christ follower in your life, that you have felt judged by them. Jesus always arrives with grace first and then followed by truth. Now, Zacchaeus can't believe that Jesus wants to actually go to his house, right? Look at this. It says, all the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. People were always muttering around Jesus, right? Because he was doing things that no other rabbi, no other teacher, no other spiritual influencer would ever do. So Zacchaeus and Jesus, they just don't care. This is something that Zacchaeus never thought would ever happen in his lifetime. That a rabbi, that a teacher, that Jesus would come to his house. He starts to reevaluate his life. Maybe to him, his house started to actually look like a prison. I wonder if Jesus was saying stuff to him like, Zacchaeus, your whole life long, you've been a money guy. You get money and you love money. But is it getting to you where you really hope that you would be? Is it getting you to that destination that you've so desired? Zacchaeus, there was a time when you had to walk everywhere because you had nothing. And then you became a tax collector and you got really good at it. And one day you could buy a donkey, right? And that was a big day. And that was pretty cool. Then the thrill of that donkey kind of wore off. And then you thought, hey, I could actually get rid of my donkey and upgrade to a camel. Now, the camel in that day, in the ancient world, is kind of like the best SUV that you could purchase. And I bet you before long, he didn't just have one SUV, he had multiple. And he still felt kind of empty. And Jesus comes back to Zacchaeus and you realize somewhere in your journey that maybe upgrading your closet, that would make you more happy. And you went from wearing a wool robe to a silk one. I don't know about you, but if you ever wore a wool robe, I don't think it'd feel too well, right? It probably rubs in the wrong way. Anyways, I digress. Then you get into this house that you're in currently right now. And you think, this isn't enough. Maybe a house on the Jordan River would make me even happier. I love what John Ortberg says here. He says, you can be satisfied with your money, but you can never be satisfied in your money. Whew. Zacchaeus is thinking different for the very first time in his life. Maybe there is a different way to live. Maybe I have been living like this, right? This closed fist lifestyle. Maybe I need to surrender these things to Jesus. Zacchaeus' heart is pounding, and he stands up and he declares this. And he stood up, Lord, here and now, I give half my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Whew. This is crazy. By the way, he's not even acknowledging the people that are sitting there. He's going right, because in the Middle East, like, you would have acknowledged everybody at your table, but he goes right to Jesus. He's talking right to Jesus, and everyone is mesmerized. They can't believe what they are hearing from the mouth of Zacchaeus. I'm sure there were doubters. I'm sure they're like, yeah, we'll see. He says, here's what I have, but enough is less than what I have. So here's what I'm going to do. The difference between what would be enough for me and what I have could become the generosity zone instead of the discontentment zone. So we go back to this image, and instead of in their discontentment, maybe, right, is in between there is actually generosity. I'm going to say, this is what I have. I'm going to be happy with what I have. And I'm also going to give. Right? I'm going to be generous. Here and now, I'm putting a stake in the ground. The man stood up. He's going public with this. I'm giving away 50%. I believe that 50% of what I have with God is more than 100% without God. That's a pretty staggering thought. I'll make things right. I'll pay people back whom I've actually robbed and cheated. Jesus said to him, this is beautiful, today, right? Salvation has come to this house because this man, a son of Abraham, right? This wee little man, this tax collector, this language is not accidental. It is something that Zacchaeus will remember the rest of his life, that salvation has come to this house. And then he goes on and he talks about that you are a son of Abraham. This would be the greatest phrase you could ever hear, that you are a son of Abraham or a daughter of Sarah, the founders of the nation of Israel. He says, salvation has come to this house. What he means is not Zacchaeus has bought his way into heaven. You can't buy your way in. You can't earn your way in. It comes as a gift of grace. And Jesus stopped by that tree way before Zacchaeus had done anything to merit anything. That word salvation is often translated as healing or deliverance. And it means something more than just if you believe the right thing, you can get to go into the pleasure factory when you die. It's more than that. It means now for Zacchaeus, that disease of more that has been controlling and corroding his soul is being healed. That treadmill he has been on forever, he's getting delivered from there. Think about this. There are really smart people all around this culture and in the society that reinforces this, that will just say, life is all about more. Your identity is all about more. Your happiness is all about more. Do you have more? Do you have bigger? I get caught into this. When Michael and I first got married, we lived in this 2-bedroom apartment that was about 700 square feet. And it was small. We were on top of each other. In fact, we had our daughter right away. She was in one room and we were in the other room. And there were some tough times in that place, but there was a lot of happy times. From there, we moved into a 1,200 square foot home. This was our very first home that we purchased. And we thought we were millionaires. We had made it. The windows in that home, we lived in Michigan at the time, and they were made in the 1940s, no exaggerations, right? So during the Michigan winter, the wind would literally blow through the home. We would have to put plastic all over our windows. And the furnace, I think, was invented by Thomas Edison, right? It was so old, it was constantly on. Then we moved to on the other side of the state, and we rented a home that was about 2,000 square feet. It's been the biggest and nicest home that we have ever lived in. And all the kids had their own bedrooms. Well, that's not true because Charlie and Henry always loved to be in the same room. But here's the question I want to ask you. Out of all of those different places where we live, where do you think we were the happiest? Nowhere. Just kidding, right? We had our tough moments in each of those places. But what do you think is the correlation between how many square feet we own and how many moments of joy we experience? There is no correlation at all. Some of our happiest moments were back in that one tiny little apartment where we started out. I can still, as I was writing this, I can still remember waking up every single day and going, I can't believe I get to live this life with Michael. We would wake up together and we would just have these happy times together. Now, here's the thing about this word enough. And this is what John Ortberg says about this word. He says, enough is not a level of wealth you achieve. It's a statement of trust you declare. I'll tell you what, I met Jason and Patricia a few years back, and this is the way that they have been living their life. I want you to watch this.
I'm Patricia.
And I'm Jason.
I work at Meta as a project manager for the quality team.
And I'm an engineer at Tesla.
We love living in the Bay Area because for me, I just love that I can drive down to the beach and go surfing, and then the next day we can drive over to the mountains, go snowboarding, skiing. I feel like nature is just at our fingertips.
Growing up, we really didn't talk about money, and I think that was kind of mainly due to my parents not really having much money. I had school supplied lunches because we were below the income limit. So I got lunch at school, and then dinners were hit and miss depending if my parents would come home and cook or not. I learned generosity from you. She had come over to this house that I was renting with my brother and went to the fridge and realized that I had no food. There was nothing to eat in the house, and the next day she had shown up with bags of groceries, right? And I was dumbfounded. I didn't really know what to say. That's more food than I would eat in 2 weeks, right? So the fact that somebody would do that for me just blew me away.
You don't have to include this part. My mom would kill me if she knew I was buying him groceries. I had a crush I wanted to.
After dating Patricia for probably 2, maybe 2.5 years at this point, there was a sermon on generosity. And after that, we talked about it, and she was like, hey, in the last few years, God has really blessed you. You should start giving some of that back. And that initially I was like, oh no, I can't give any money. I'm still not making enough. She was like, just give what you can. So I was like, okay, I could probably do $50 a month. And then after a couple months, I realized, oh, I'm really not even noticing this. Go through the bank account, $50, okay. Why not $100? Why can't I do $100 a month? And then she was like, kind of going into the theory of tithing, and it's like, hey, well, the Bible kind of says 10%, maybe try 10%. I was like, oh no, I can't do 10%, no. But after thinking it through, like, okay, let's try 10%. And I remember the first couple months of doing 10%, I was like, can't go out to eat dinner, ain't got no cash. And then out of the blue, I got promoted at work. And then she was like, no, you were being faithful, you're doing what God said to give your money back, and now he's blessing you with more.
We've chosen to be generous at Eastown because we would be such a small part of those huge organizations. And for me, I wanna see the impact that I can make. It's awesome when we give to Eastown, we can immediately see where that's going.
Once you get into this concept, we're gonna put the money in and it's gonna help the people in our immediate surroundings. It's really a no-brainer at that point. This is our community, and this is what we want to develop.
Love local.
Love local.
I don't think we'll ever feel like we have enough. Like, you will never ever feel like you have enough, because that's just our human nature. Like, I'm selfish. I don't know about you, but but I will always want more and will always strive to get more. You have to put generosity at the forefront of your faith and trust that God will provide for you, and He will always give you more than you think you need.
I love that story. I love Jason. Even listening to that story, I was learning things about him for the very first time. And there's so much more, and hopefully we get to post more of that story. There's so much more to that story. Listening to how Patricia learned the idea of generosity, watching her father sacrifice, when they had nothing, because he understood that generosity wasn't necessarily always his resources, but it was his heart. And he would give whatever it was that God was putting on his heart to give. Now, how the Bible thinks about finances is different than how our society thinks. We think that whatever we make is 100% ours. I get to keep it. If that goes away, then I am less than, right? That I have lost something. But listen to what Scripture says. You have to decide if you actually believe this or not. I want to show you this scripture found in the Old Testament in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58. If you spend yourselves feeding the hungry and helping those in trouble, then your light will shine out from the darkness, and the darkness around you shall be as bright as day. And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy you with all good things and keep you healthy too. And you will be like a well-watered garden, like an ever-flowing spring. Now, you have to make the decision, do I believe that or not? I would say that most of us believe that money is just math. The Bible says there's this new kind of math. It's not Common Core. Even Jesus would be upset at that. But anyways, Zacchaeus is believing in this new type of math. If you think about the world, it started as a result of generosity. It's how we are made. It's our identity. Listen to this in this book called Charity. It says this: generosity is not just a good deed, but a declaration of belief about the world and the God who created it. Now, here's some things I want to give you in closing. These are disciplines that I want you, spiritual disciplines that I want you to take a step into and really think about. Now, if you're driving or if you're watching this, I want you to think through this. Like, what is one area that God is calling you to take a step into? What step towards enough do you need to take? Maybe for some of you, it's purchasing, it's buying clothes. Could you even come to the place like, I have enough. I have enough. Maybe for some of you who are into cars, into vehicles, it's always about the next car. Is this car enough? Maybe for some of you, it's that you're constantly thinking of that next house. Is our current house enough? Because maybe for some of you, it's like, whether it's with clothing, it's with cars, or it's with a house, it's like you are so strapped, it's virtually impossible for you to be generous. It's like, this is what Jesus is always talking about. He talks more about materialism and finances than any other thing in his time here on earth. Why? Because he knows that it will control us. He knows that it will fill our time, occupy us, bring fear, bring anxiety into our life. We can't be generous because we're strapped. But if we could live like we have enough, there's more that we could do. Maybe for some of you, it's like, I'm going to declare that 45 hours of work or 40 hours a week is enough because I am ridden with anxiety. I don't have enough time for my kids or for my family. Maybe for some of you, you need to step into giving. And maybe for some of you, you've been with Eastown for a while and you're giving, but it's not causing you to sacrifice anything in your life. And in fact, it's just kind of a checklist at this point. It's like, yeah, we do that, but it's not causing you to live differently. And it's not causing you to impact other people's lives. Maybe for some of you, you've never taken the step to say, what percentage of my income am I even giving? Maybe today as you start saying, hey, I want to start giving at least 2% of my income. Maybe for some of you, it's working towards that 10%. I will often have people to say to me that kind of understand the scriptures, well, Jesus didn't really talk about tithing. He did a little bit. But here's so we don't necessarily need to tithe. Well, here's an option that you can do. In the Old Testament, it's very clear that we give a tenth. We get whatever we make, we give a tenth back right away. Or you can choose to live the way Jesus did. He gave everything away. He commands us to give everything. I always tell people it sounds a little bit better to start here. But we want to live in a way where we're open-handed. When Jesus comes knocking, when a need arises, we're able to give. What is enough? Hey, I want to just say, take the time, take the step, move towards Jesus, listen to his truth, believe in his promises. And next week, we're going to continue this series. You're not going to want to miss it. I want to thank you again for being here today.
I count on one thing, the same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will. I count on one thing, the same God who never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. Working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names, that nothing can stand against. Oh yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes.